everyone. I'm Evelyn Kessler, host of Wednesday Wellness Chat with Evelyn and Friends. As many of you know, the pandemic brought to light the importance of practicing self-care. So during these Wednesday Wellness Chats, what I wanted to do is have conversations with friends, health and wellness experts, professionals, to discuss how we can all incorporate self-care practices in our day-to-day lives. Today's chat is with Amanda Alford, Miranda Patchen, and Sylvia Johnston. Amanda's a wife, mother of 3 young children, entrepreneur, dog groomer, and Buffalo, New York native. Amanda and her husband run their family-owned businesses, Alford's Angels Dog Grooming Salon and Nickel City Pet Pantry. Amanda is the event coordinator of She Can, a nonprofit organization that empowers women to become the best version of themselves. She is also on the steering board and leads Diverse is She, a diversity and inclusion team of She Can. Miranda Patchen is a banker and is very active in diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. She draws upon her unique perspective growing up biracial in an undiverse environment. She is also passionate about health and wellness. She is a certified group fitness instructor who loves to motivate and encourage women to find exercise that they love and to put themselves first. She believes exercise is so important, not just for physical benefits, but also for mental health benefits. Sylvia Johnston is a daughter of Korean-German immigrants. Currently, she's an adjunct professor with the University at Buffalo School of Management, teaching performance management and reward systems. She has been a banker for 22 years at M&T Bank. Sylvia lives in Buffalo, New York with her husband and 3 children, enjoying chauffeuring her children everywhere and is a caregiver to her mom. She is passionate about helping people find their passion and how to negotiate change in complex situations. Let's meet today's guest. Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's Wednesday Wellness Chat. I am here with 3 incredible women to discuss the topic of growing up biracial and or raising biracial children. So we'll dive into personal stories, personal experiences. So I'm really excited to have this discussion with all of you and to hear your personal experiences. So today I am with Sylvia Johnston, Miranda Patchen, and Amanda Alford. So I just want to kick this off in regards to where we are today with biracial, multiracial populations in the United States, because I've been really curious to understand, where we were and where we are today. And according to census.gov, the multiracial population has changed considerably since 2010. It was measured at 9 million people at that point in time. And that number, as I'm sure you guys assume, it has increased. Can one of you guess where we are today? Or should I say 2020 is when the last census took place? Any guesses?
Are we up to 20?
Say it doubled.
So okay.
I was thinking it doubled.
All right. Well, we are at 33.8 million.
It tripled and more.
It's pretty crazy, right? I mean, I figured that it increased, but we went from 9 million in 2010 to 33.8 million in 2020. So the in combination multiracial population for all race groups accounted for most of the overall changes in each racial category. So let's get right into the discussion. I first would like to start with hearing each and every single one of your stories and or experiences with either growing up biracial or raising biracial children, because all of us have direct experiences with this topic. So Miranda, if you could kick us off and share with us what your experience was like.
Sure, Evelyn, and thanks for having me. I'm very passionate about this topic and speak about it here and there. I was born and raised on Grand Island, and my father was Black and my mother is from the Netherlands. She's white, European, and they were together in the early 70s. lived in Tonawanda, well, Niagara Falls, Tonawanda area. Um, it was tough for them, but I think it was a little less of a big deal because my mom was from Europe. So, there's a different type of mentality around these issues in Europe, especially at that time. So, but, my mother had a lot of difficulties and lost a lot of friends and had a hard time being accepted by my father's family. And, then she had three girls I was born in 74 and then a sister 2 years later, and then another sister 7 years later. We lived in a predominantly white suburban middle class area, and there were no other Black people around or, in our school district, there might have been one or two others, but, you know, it wasn't, I think because of that, it didn't come up. And when I say it didn't come up, what I mean is I can honestly say I didn't think of any kind of difference until maybe middle school. And even, visiting my dad's side of the family versus my mom's side of the family, I never really thought about it. It was what it was. And we were happy kids and we had a great life. And, that didn't come up. I started middle school and I think, well, I will say I probably did notice a little bit of a difference. We had a pool and always had the whole neighborhood over for swimming and everything. And there was such a hard time with my hair versus all of my friends. And, but again, I wasn't really thinking I'm a different race, just thinking, well, my hair is very difficult and I hate it. So anyway, I went to a predominantly an all white grade school. And then when I switched to middle school, there were a couple other kids from the other elementary school on the island that were Black. So that was the first time that I, was in a daily situation with other Black kids and started to realize that there was a difference and started, being bullied a little bit because all of my friends were white. The way I present myself, the way I speak, I guess you could say is white. So, I did have a couple Black kids kind of poke at me and that type of thing, but nothing super traumatic. That traumatic stuff happened in high school. But, I don't recall any conversations with my parents about being biracial until probably high school when they joined Interracial Club of Buffalo, which was a wonderful nonprofit that was formed just because there were not, the number now is so high, but back in the early 80s, biracial kids were few and far between. So it was a nice community of biracial parents and their kids, and we did fun things. And I'm sure the parents talked a lot about what their struggles were, and us kids just played and we're like, you know what, we're all swimming and we all have the same hair problems. So, that's when I really got an awareness of what the differences were between myself and others. Not to go on too much here, but I will say that I don't recall much racism growing up. I do remember I was in Girl Scouts, and I do remember one girl who was a friend of mine. She decided to start playing this game where she would ball up a piece of paper and tell everybody, hit the black dot, win a prize, and they'd all throw wadded up paper at me. It was nothing that I felt comfortable saying to anybody. I kind of just took it and moved on and, felt hurt about it, but I didn't say anything to anyone. I think if that were to happen in a school district in this day and age, there would be repercussions, but not then. I was sleeping over kids' houses every weekend. I had a lot of friends. Life was good. I will share one incident that happened on Grand Island. I was in high school at the time, and for the first time I had braids put in my hair, and wore the braids for a couple weeks or a month or whatever, and then went to a friend's house on the other side of the island. I was driving at the time, so I must have been a junior or senior. Drove there, she took the braids out, and when your braids come out, your hair is crazy, right? Sticking straight out, and it's all, everybody knows what that looks like. So driving down Baseline Road like I had done a million times before, and I got pulled over. And the reason that I was given that I was pulled over was I had a sticker on the window, on the side window of the passenger side. While I bought the car from another Grand Island High School student who was white that I'm sure never got pulled over for having that sticker on his vehicle. But I was pulled over, really wasn't given a reason, but in hindsight, I'm sure it was because he saw some brown kid with what looked like an afro driving in a white town. So, those types of things did start to happen more as I got into high school. But overall, I think I had a wonderful childhood, but I have learned to read the room. I have learned to be a chameleon. I have learned to code switch, and that's just a product of my environment and trying to fit in to where I am, because I never really feel like I do fit in. So I'll give someone else a chance to give a little background.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Miranda. You touched on so many key items that we're going to dig into throughout the conversation. So thank you so much for sharing your story. So next we'll move to Sylvia. Sylvia, if you want to go ahead and share your experiences.
My story that I'd like to share is more that I had perhaps the opposite experience of Miranda, in that I believe, without knowing it, I was questioning my identity pretty much from when I was little. I'm first generation American. My father's from Germany. My mom is from Korea, but my mom was a big influencer in my life. And so I grew up going to Korean churches. And some of my earliest memories at Korean churches was that the Korean adults would bend down, get really close to my face, and ask me, who is your daddy? Who is your mommy? Is your mommy white? Or is it your daddy that's white? Because I would be off in Sunday school. They wouldn't see me with my mom, and they would just question my background. And usually I would say, well, they would say, is your dad American? And I say, well, no, my dad's German. And the reactions were always mixed. Like sometimes it was just silence and they walked away. Other times they started asking more questions. If they were married, do I have siblings? Sometimes there was like, oh, you're so beautiful. And other times I could tell it was perhaps the opposite. And so here I had, Korean people, really experiencing, I think, racism from them the first. Like now I know in hindsight, from my own Korean community, I have experienced racism because my identity was questioned, and I didn't feel like I belonged. But yet then growing up in Downingtown, Pennsylvania, which was a very white community, I was one of the few Asian children, half Asian children, and in my school I was called Chinky Eyes and all sorts of things too, back in the 80s, same thing. And so I was just like, but I'm not Korean, like no, but I'm not white. So really, it's funny. Like for me, you don't really know it when you're in it. I believe that I was experiencing a lot of these microaggressions because it was normal. People would ask me, "Who are you? What are you?" and such. And so it wasn't until actually I moved to Germany. In 5th grade, did Germans call me American, like, oh, she's the American girl. And it was really there where I almost felt welcomed by a community in a way I hadn't felt welcomed here, going to Korean churches or living in the community that I did in Pennsylvania. And interestingly enough, and I shared this with you before, Evelyn, it was how when I was 23, I went to Hawaii. And when I went to Hawaii, I was just in a grocery store. We were picking up a few things, and the statement came in my head where I thought, it's like, nobody's going to ask me here, what are you? Or who are you? And I remember just like this tightness being released from my chest. And I just felt like this weight off my shoulders, like weight that I didn't even know I had. I wasn't even thinking about it. It just like popped in my head in the supermarket. And I still remember, like, we were in the cereal aisle and I think it's in part because you don't know what you don't know, or that feeling, and that it maybe had bothered me all these years up until I was 23. And recognizing kind of what has shaped me to feel a certain way. And so I think, as a child, like I said, you don't know what you don't know. I think being questioned who you are, and then me just responding the only way I knew how, which is, well, this is my parents and this is what I am, and was the best way in which I could handle it back then. Certainly now as an adult, I have a little bit more fun with it, but yeah, that's my background.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And we're definitely going to get into a little bit more the who are you, what are you questions, because I had my own personal experiences when it comes to my kids. But first, I want to go to Amanda. So Amanda, if you'd love to share your experiences with us.
Yes, I'd love to. So for me, right out the gate, my experience was, I'll just say funny, right? So my mom is Black. So for her, when she gave birth to me, for forever, everyone would question her, like, who is that? And no one believed I was her daughter. I came out of this beautiful woman. They would think I was adopted, and vice versa. When people asked me, no one believed me that was my mom. She's brown, like that can't possibly be your mom. So from the jump, being biracial, I always had to say, I'm biracial, because people looked at me and assumed I was white. I can say growing up, my mom, she put us in many different diverse environments. So I grew up on the east side of Buffalo, just, Black families. But we went to school in North Buffalo, which were predominantly white families, and we went to a Catholic school. So all white children, maybe a handful of Black students. But I was a social butterfly. I always blended in with everyone. I never thought of anything. I always felt like I fitted in. So in grammar school, a lot of white kids. And then right after grammar school, we would go to where my mom was working, which was a charter school, Black children. So we were everywhere. A big portion of my life, my mom, she worked at the YWCA, which was extremely diverse, lots of different children and ethnicities. It was always good, but it did depend on where we were. So for instance, for grammar school, after grammar school, we would go to a daycare. My mom was an extremely hard worker. She worked 24/7. And at this daycare, they would call me and my sisters. I have 3 sisters. We all are different shades. One looks a little more, she looks more Black than, my one sister looks like she's Spanish. But anyway, they would call us, the workers there. We didn't like it there. We feel like they weren't nice to us. They would call us snow bunnies. And we didn't know why they were calling us snow bunnies. We were young, we had no idea. And we told our mother, and our mother let us know, they're basically calling you guys undercover white people because I'm Black. She took us out of there immediately. And again, my mom, she worked nights. So after that, she put us in a daycare that was down the street from our home. It was a family-owned daycare. A Black family owned the daycare. And I remember going there, and I remember not liking going there either. I felt like, the kids weren't nice to me and my sisters. And it was the one straw for my mother, where the older kids, I was a little bit younger at the time, took my 2 older sisters and made them fight the other girls in the room. And it was white girls against Black girls. And I remember my mom being, she took us out of there right away. And then from there, I talked about the YWCA, but she kept us with her, and any kind of daycare needs, we were with her. And it was a really great experience. So, it depends where we were, what box I fitted into, even though I felt I fitted in every box because I'm Black. Like, what are you guys talking about? So, and another experience where, like, growing up, where I kind of felt it's like the flip side. So usually when you're Black, you walk into a room, you're probably like the only one of the few only Black people in the room. So for high school, I actually won an O'Shai scholarship, which was for minorities. So I won this scholarship. I'm excited. They have a whole luncheon for it. I go in, I walk in with my mom, but I'm like getting these looks because, I appear to be white. And they're kind of like those questions, like, and I get those questions of what are you? Like, how did you qualify for this scholarship? So, I can definitely say growing up, I had so many different experiences. I definitely was in diverse places and environments, but it always came across, who I was in front of and what they had experienced, or if they've seen a biracial or dealt with biracial people before. So that's a little bit of my background growing up. I can definitely say going into an adult, it's a whole nother experience because my husband, he's Black. And at the time, I remember, we weren't married yet. We were younger. We didn't have our first child yet. But I remember walking down like Kenmore Avenue in Buffalo and us getting these dirty looks. And from the eyes, it was a Black and white couple together, and not everyone's okay with that, even still to this day, which is crazy. And I would be mind blown, like, because, my mom and dad were, an interracial couple, had kids. I'm like, how is this still happening? And this is like 2016-ish, where this was still happening. And then I can say going further into that, as still a young parent, I had my 2 children. We actually moved into an apartment, and right next door was a very racist older woman. And I never experienced racism like boom in my face before until that moment, where this woman would legit call my husband the N-word, all the stereotypes, calling him a drug dealer. When she caught wind that I was biracial, I was a half-breed, I was dirty. It was one of the most crazy experiences that I've had with racism.
That is incredible.
And that was in 2018. I was dealing with that, and it was in our children. They were around during the time, having to see that. We had to explain to them what was going on. Not only was she racist, but she was just an old woman that had nothing to do all day.
Right.
So it was really rough during that time. So I can just say, my background's all across the board.
That is so crazy to me, Amanda. And you know what? That reinforces the fact that, racism is alive and it's still there. It still exists. And the reason why I say that is because I had someone tell me, racism does not exist anymore. That's in the past. So your personal experience is so, I'm glad you share that. Thank you for sharing that. And I know that must be hard for you to share it, especially since your children were right there. But the fact that we still have people to this day and age that will treat people as an other or beneath them just because they look different, may sound different, be different in some type of way, just really blows my mind. So I feel like these types of conversations are really important for people to understand, hey, we're all here just trying to live, just trying to be the best that we can be, trying to raise our families, all of that. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's a perfect segue to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, because Sylvia touched on it, you touched on it, and that's tackling the question of who are you / what are you? For those that don't know, I'm in an interracial relationship. My husband is white. And when I had my first child, my daughter, at the hospital, the nurses were beyond shocked. They just couldn't believe that I could have such a kid. And Amanda, similar to your mom's experience, in the hospital, the nurses would come up and tell me, did you cheat on your husband? Your baby looks Chinese. And actually it was my a doctor that asked me if I cheated on my husband. Everybody was calling her Chinese. They were calling her the Eskimo baby. Later on, when she was 6 or 7 months old, I was constantly being asked if I was the nanny, like how long have I been working for my husband? The craziest types of things. And folks would just ask, what is she? Who is she? And when I would say she's my daughter, they just would not believe it. They thought I was lying. So they kept prying, wanting to know what in the world is this child? So my question to you ladies is, how did you tackle that question in the past versus today? How have you evolved as a person? And I would love to hear present day, your mindset, and how you can help others tackle when they're faced with that question. So whoever would like to go first.
I could go first. The way I handle it when I was younger, I always just explained who my parents were because I didn't really know who I was. So I was like, well, I'm half German, half Korean, or because to me it was like I'm Sylvia from Downingtown. Like it was sort of how I had always responded, but that wasn't good enough. So I had to explain what my parents were. So I think growing up as I was younger, I just explained my parents' background, and I didn't know kind of what the intent was behind the questions. And based on reactions, I can see if it was welcomed or not. Now, as an adult, and even 3 years ago when I moved into a different department, someone had told me, they're like, yeah, people are asking, what is she? Or like, what are you and stuff. And it's fine. And I think when I get that question directly, now I have more fun with it, in part because I want to know people's intention behind it. Like, I want to know, is it because they are questioning, because they have some thoughts, or are they genuinely curious and want to learn more because they're open, or because they want to just validate their own opinions, the way you were being told that, no, this is not your child. I will now, depending on how the question's asked, in what situation it's asked, I will say that I will often just ask first to be like, oh, well, I'll share if you share. And I will say, like, what's your background?
That's a great one.
Yeah. So, and sometimes, and I think it's funny, like sometimes white people don't have that response and they don't know, or they'll be like, oh, well, my mom's like Irish and German, like they'll kind of like say everything. So sometimes I'll say that. And other times I'll just share. I'll just say, well, I'm half Korean and I half German, and I have a lot of stories about that. How much time do you have? Like, just curious, same thing. Like what would you like to know? And then depending on the questions that come back is usually when I can assess, oh, they're curious and they really are caring and want to get to know me, or no, they're just kind of like, they just want to know and move on, and are not necessarily interested in getting to know me. And I think there's that balance of like of just figuring that out. And so that's what I do.
I love that, knowing their intent. I think that's key, because I agree that if the person truly wants to know and they want to be educated, then that's a complete different vibe, right? As opposed to someone looking at you like this oddity and, all right, let me just, for the fun of it, push this person's buttons, because sometimes that's what people do. But I really, really love that approach. Thank you so much, Sylvia. And I see Miranda's unmuted, so I'm going to go to you next.
Yeah, gosh, I've gotten that question my whole life. The way I respond to that now, and the way I even react to that initially now, is completely different than even maybe 10 years ago. A lot of time, and I will say, a lot of times it's in the context of you're strikingly beautiful, or you have such a unique look, or when I get those types of questions, and then they'll say like, but again, it's always, what are you? I think a more polite thing to say would be, I'm just curious about your ethnicity, or
Right.
What's your background? What are you, to me, is like what you'd ask a dog. You know, are you a Rottweiler? Are you a poodle? I don't like that. But 9 times out of 10, people are just asking because they can't figure it out. I see people staring. You know, people don't know if I'm Indian or if I'm Italian. I have, you know, my son says I have a witch nose. So, you know, there are, and my sisters too. My sisters look like me in some regard, but they both have green eyes. I am sure they get the question a lot more than I do just because of their eye color. But when I get that question and I sense a negative tone, now I just say I'm human. And how they respond to that determines if we're going to have a conversation or not. Because I'm just not here to answer your questions about, you know, silliness anymore. So back in the day, I would just say, well, I'm biracial. And I'd feel bad about myself that I was even asked that question. But now, you know, I have pride in myself and I know who I am. And when people ask that in an ignorant way or a devious way, it just shows me who they are. And that's a tool, right? Right. Now I know right off the bat, I just met you, you're asking me what I am and I don't like your tone. So I already know enough about you to form an opinion about what kind of relationship we're going to have.
Right, right. I love that. And that goes back to what you said about reading the room. So that's huge. Thank you. Thank you so much, Miranda. And Amanda, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me as a child, when anyone would ask, like, what are you? Honestly, I'd be happy about it because looking at me, you can't, you know, they think I'm white. So I'm like, oh, wait, you could tell I'm something? Yes, I'm Black. My mom is Black. So for me, I'd get excited because I want to shout it to the moon because no one knows unless I say something about it. So yeah, as a child, I don't really feel like I got asked it that much, but, you know, growing up, getting a little bit older, same as you, Miranda, people come up to me, you know, you look exotic or, you know, are you something? And so, you know, I'd let them know. It's funny, I have a story with my husband. His grandma, his father's from Zimbabwe. So his grandma came in from Zimbabwe and first time meeting the kids. And, you know, I remember her asking like, what are you? Like, how did this happen? And I was taken back. Like, what do you mean, how did this happen? But she was asking, how did me and Jillian get together? You know, they were big on, they thought I was white. So I had to sit down with her, show her my family pictures, my mother, and, you know, very sweet lady. After we went through the whole spiel, she was like, you know, very loving and all good about it, but like she really wanted an explanation from me, like, you know, like, what is this? Like, but yeah, present day, when people ask me like, what are you? I ask them, what do I look like? That's how I like to respond. You tell me what you think I am, because I want to know. And
yeah, I do the same thing.
Nice.
Yeah, I get people that are like, are you Egyptian? I'm like, that's the biggest compliment. Thank you.
I love
I
it.
wish it, but no, I'm not. So
yeah, I do that.
Love it. That's cool. I love it. I love all of your responses and the way you tackle that question. And I think that's going to help a lot of folks out there, especially, you know, those that are still, you know, maybe in middle school or high school and still navigating their identity. So I want to segue now into the topic of identity. And Miranda, you mentioned code switching and reading the room and having to be a chameleon. So for me, the next thing I would like to tackle is, you know, have you found yourself needing to flip from one race or identity to another where you felt pressured, either from other people or internally you felt like you needed to pick a side? And, you know, I really wanted to discuss this because I recently read an article about Kelly Curtis. She's the first Black skeleton athlete to compete at the US Olympics. And when she heard that she was being referred to as the first Black skeleton athlete, This is what she had to say, and I'm going to quote her words. I didn't expect my first Olympic Games to create such a buzz around my genotype. I think it's okay to claim the space being biracial, Black and white at the same time, not half and half. My experience growing up in America is a fully nuanced one that can't be conveniently sliced into two. So I'd love to hear your take on this. And, if you have found yourself, be it in the past, current day, having to pick a side, having to adjust and be that chameleon, as Miranda said. So Amanda, I'd like to start with you.
I've never felt like I had to pick a side or switch according to what room I was in. I could definitely say, like, for others, how they accepted me might have been different. But for me, I'm like, I am my mother's child. So I am my mom, although I don't look like my mom. So I feel like if I'm in a Black room, like I fit in, like this is family. Like if I'm in the white room, I fit in. So for me, yeah, it was always how the others perceived me, how that determined of me having to fit in. But I don't know. I'd really never really had a big issue with it. I no matter what person, I really feel like I meshed well with all types of different people. So for me, I never had to, in regards to race, flip a switch or like, I just come me, this is it. You like me, you don't. Like, I hope you love me, but yeah, this is me.
If not, that's okay, right? So do you think that, so do you think that because you grew up in that environment where your mom intentionally placed you guys in these multiracial programs and environments, do you think that they had a big part to play in it? As far as your mindset today?
Absolutely, because I was definitely exposed to both, and that's not to say there was a mix in the room. Like it was definitely separate. Like there's times I was with the Black community, and there's times I was just with the white community. But just being able to go, one day I'm here, or the next hour I'm here. I definitely just was able to experience just all of it. So I do think that was a big help. Where I know Miranda, she said growing up, she was predominantly in a white neighborhood. And it wasn't until high school she got to experience, Black culture or other Black children. But, for me growing up all the way through, I got to experience all types of, situations. Not, obviously not everything was always good, but
it helped.
I felt good, and it helped. I felt good in every room I walked into.
That's awesome. So
I would like to be honest and say there were times I did feel maybe a little bit more shy, a little bit more timid, let's say in a room full of Black people, but that's only because I felt like they weren't, they were looking at me like, what is this white girl doing here?
Right.
But without any of those feelings, like if I knew the people in the room, like it was always all good for me.
So for me, I'm similar to Amanda that I had sort of the German experience and the Korean experience. It wasn't like until college that I went to like the Caribbean Student Association parties, like the Vietnamese, like I would really like immerse myself and kind of learn different cultures. Because the barrier for me was I had sort of a language component in my family because my dad and my mom both didn't speak English. They came to this country. They didn't have good communication skills with each other, which is why their marriage did not work out. But and then my dad was like, "We live in America. We have to speak American." So my mom never spoke Korean with me growing up, and my dad didn't speak German. And so, but yet certain phrases and words, because they were learning English, did come into my life. My best friend Nora was like, she would say, why does your mom keep on saying Liza, Liza? And it was like my Korean mom was saying Liza, which is quiet in German, when we were being too loud in the apartment, so growing up, it was sort of like language was sort of the barrier for me. And the reasons why I had to find myself in situations to code switch or to sort of assimilate is in part because I wanted to make sure I did understand them correctly, because my mom used to get angry at me if I didn't understand her. So I would have to keep guessing and guessing. And I think that's why I cut off people now. It's not because I'm an extrovert, which is what people in surveys claimed I am. I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm actually more in the middle or an introvert. It's actually because growing up, my mom wanted me to try to figure out what she was trying to say. And so I always had to try to jump in. It's like, do you mean this? Do you mean this? And it's something that still continues with me today. And so for me, when I moved to Germany, actually, I sought out Korean schools, language, to learn Korean and to learn, and I learned German because I was living in Germany. But it's really through language and by going to other countries, immersing myself into those different clubs, by picking up phrases and words, that I feel like the question of identity was mitigated because I chose and demonstrated I was trying to speak the language. Not only that, I noticed that when I was mimicking people, which sometimes is not welcomed, right? But when I was mimicking the way they were talking, I could understand them better, actually, because of my ear, and they could understand me better. And so even when I went to England, in Northern England, they cut off every single word. I couldn't understand a word they were saying when we were both speaking English. And I was like, I'm speaking American. I said, you're speaking, I don't understand. And it wasn't until I started mimicking them did I really kind of understand them. So in some ways, for me, it was a little bit of forcing it, because I was really just living with it, and as a child of trying to understand somebody, in part. So I was forced to do that.
I love that. I love that you took the initiative to go out there, learn different cultures, immerse yourself. So that's key to being intentional of trying to learn the other side, or other ways of living and identities. That's really cool. Thank you, Sylvia. Miranda, I'm gonna move to you now. If you can share with us, your experiences as far as having to code switch, or feel like you need to pick a side or choose an identity. What has your experience been with that?
Yeah, so it's been a struggle. That whole dynamic has been a struggle for me. When I reflect, it's mainly because I've had low self-esteem my whole life. I'm a very shy person. I'm an introvert. My mother coddled us. She protected us. And I think that, so I grew up on Grand Island. When we would go over to Niagara Falls to visit my dad's side of the family, there was a lot of poverty. A lot of them lived in the projects. There was, the government cheese, and, lots of young mothers and single mothers, and, just a harder life. So those visits would be few and far between, and my mother would, bring us right back to Grand Island, where everything was great and happy and fun. But I did feel out of place with my own family on my dad's side. I felt like I had to use what I call a black scent. The way I talk, I felt I was being judged, or, they'd say that I was trying to be better than them, or, the reality was Black girls didn't like me. Black guys loved me, but Black girls did not like me. They were jealous. They thought that I was trying to take their men, like just a lot of things that weren't true. And that was just me existing, So I think there were a lot of things in people's heads that were assumptions that just weren't true about me. Especially when I went to college. I went to Buff State. I went from an all-white high school to, oh, wow, this is Buff State, where there's all ethnicities and a lot of Black people from all over the country. And I don't even know who I am anymore. So I started really having an identity crisis. I was a model, I was a dancer, I was working in the mall at a really awesome store called Merry Go Round, where it was all about fun. And, I was trying to fit into the Black part of me. I was dancing with a rap group, and, going to clubs at night. But then like I'd come home and hang out with my white friends and I would become a different person. I would talk differently. I would dress differently. And when I started to go more towards the Black side of who I was, I lost a lot of my friends, my long-term friends from high school, and not necessarily their fault, but I stopped communicating with them. And I thought, okay, well, I think I have to be Black. Like I just didn't know. So it was hard. I lost a lot of friendships, a lot of lifelong friendships, kids from kindergarten. And I fell into a trap of trying to fit in with people that couldn't care less about me, and ended up with nobody. So I've learned to really, like you said, read the room and change who I am internally. But now as an adult, I'm 47 years old. I know who I am. I'm married to a white man. I have a wonderful son. And if people don't like me as I am and how I present myself, then they're not good enough to be in my life. So I've come a long way.
I love that. I love to hear that journey. That's quite incredible. And I have a gazillion stories that I could share too on the topic, but that is key what you said, getting to that place where you accept who you are, where you love who you are as a human being. Honestly, that changes the world truly, because for me personally as well, I'm extremely shy. I'm an introvert. A lot of times I'll mention that to people, especially if I've recently done a presentation or whatever. They're like, oh, you're lying, that's not true. But I've really gotten to a place where I've had to force myself to put myself out there. So adding in the complexity of an identity crisis and the racial trauma that one may have experienced and some of us carry into our adulthood can really affect you. So I'm happy that you were able to get to that place where you love yourself, accept yourself to a point where it doesn't really matter who wants to be around you or not. So speaking of that, I can't stop thinking about our kids, our children as biracial. And I would love for us to just take a quick minute or two to just share, how do you help your children navigate their identity, or if you even bother bringing it up, do you even feel it's necessary to bring it up? For me personally, the mindset that I have had is to not put too much emphasis, right, on you're this or you're that, but more so helping them appreciate their dad's side. He's German and English, but also help them appreciate that on my side, there's the Congolese heritage, and to be proud of both, right? So, but not constantly being on them, oh, you're biracial or you're this. No, but just naturally and organically making it part of their lives. Now, of course, when George Floyd was killed, that was a whole different situation. And, we have to honestly be realistic about, there are certain people who will see you in a certain light. So it's still important to have that conversation. But I feel for me personally, I don't like to make it such a huge deal where they become paranoid or now they're questioning everything about themselves, but still at least bringing it up, having that discussion, and then, moving forward from there. So for you ladies, how have you helped your kids navigate, if you do have had those conversations at all?
Yeah, so I'll start. So it's funny because I have an 8-year-old, an almost 6-year-old, 2 boys, and then a 7-month-old girl. And I know I'll have to explain it to her. And she's the opposite of me. She came out brown. It's like my mom, it skipped me, went to my daughter. It's so funny. I'm experiencing what my mom did. But so my son actually came to me one day asking me, Mom, are you white? And I'm like, no. So I had to break it down. Grandma's this, grandpa's this, and on daddy's side, grandma's this, grandpa's this. And it was so cute. So my 5-year-old, he kind of wrapped it all up like, okay, so you're white on the outside and you're black on the inside. I'm like, go with that, that you to the appearance, yes, but I'm biracial, and so you have me, and then you have dad who's black, and you're both of us. So again, Evelyn, I haven't gotten too deep into it. I do think it's important for them to know going into the world what they're perceived as. They are, my black sons, like you're going to be your black children. And sometimes, a lot of times in this world, bad things are happening to people with brown, black skin. But nothing I've dived into with my children yet, because I don't want them to be paranoid. They're super sensitive kids, super friendly kids, but I want to protect them because things are happening where other little kids are being taught racist things and keeping that racism alive and doing the brown children. I can't really say where it was, but it breaks my heart because it was current day, where a group of kids took the black boy in class and they took him to a pond and they drowned him just because of the color of their skin.
Oh,
and
no.
that story, and that was around the time of all the George Floyd things that were happening.
Oh my gosh.
Happens, and for me to think that can still happen. Children can still hurt other children, and they were taught this. They were taught this. So yeah, that's how I kind of I haven't gotten too deep into it because they're young.
Yeah.
My kids, they have beautiful, thick, curly hair, long hair. They're amazing. And yeah, they definitely have questions about it. So I'm here to answer. I'm very open with my children. So any questions they have, we hash it out.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Sylvia, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I know with my children, so I have 2 boys and a girl too, a little bit ahead than that. I have a 17, a 14, and my daughter's 11. And I will say that I didn't think that my kids would experience, racism as in part because I did marry English, Irish, Canadian background husband, and I didn't think my kids looked as Asian as others might perceive them to be. But yet, my sons did experience on the hockey rink, on the ice. One of them, one of the games, he did experience somebody calling him chicky eyes. I was like, oh my gosh. It's which is funny to me because I didn't think. I don't think my children.
In this day and age, listen.
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. And so if anything, I know that they're going to live with white privilege. I know I have lived with white privilege. And so if anything, what I try to do is try to take the emotion out of it and get very pinpointed in my coaching around what it is they can control and what is out of their control, and whether or not it's worth it to even engage or not engage. And so for me, if anything, I know that they will observe racism of others than they will experience themselves, I think, in part because of shades of skin and all of that. And I'm trying to teach them how to be an ally and how to create safe spaces or to make other people feel safe and to have empathy over what other people might be going, because even the whole diversity around socioeconomic, poor between rich, they're feeling the same type of fear and emotion than those that might be feeling the way about the color of their skin, right? Which is really uncontrollable, but so is sometimes socioeconomic status too, right? especially in this country. And so I do think that if anything, I'm trying to teach them to be an ally. I know the thing that my mom used to say whenever I came to her and kind of complained to her about what somebody said or somebody do, she taught me the phrase, so what? She's like, just tell them, so what? So growing up, so if this is a teenager that's listening or somebody and they don't know how to respond in the moment because they're very angry or they're sad or whatever, just say the quick words, so what? And I really think that has helped me in a lot of situations, because in the moment it can be perceived as something positive or not. It's depending on what that person's intent is, and it can kind of open up too. So so like I said, if anything, I try to teach being an ally, but also how to process things is really important to me. How to process things when they get something.
So what? I love that. Thank you. Thank you, Sylvia. And Miranda, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, fortunately, I don't think, like myself, I don't think my son really realized any kind of difference about himself until very recently. I tell the story, I think he was about 8 maybe, and I'm just going to say I have a chocolate addiction. They have to hide it in the house on Halloween and Easter. Like it's bad. If I buy some, they have to hide it from me. I ask them to hide it from me and only give it to me if I beg for it. So I have a real problem. But I'll never forget, we were just sitting there one day and I was eating some chocolate and my son says, "Now I know why you're so brown, Mom. You won't stop eating chocolate."
Ah,
And I'm kind of like, yeah, yep, you got it, kiddo. But my son is very fair-skinned in the winter and can get very dark very quickly in the summer, just like his mom. But I don't think he's in a place where kids are going to pick on him for that. At least I would hope not. But I tell him if people ever say anything to you, you let me know and we talk about it. But I do think it's important to have a conversation about race with your children if you have biracial kids at some point when you feel that they're mature enough. But also, like Amanda's parents did, they were in very diverse areas in their life and, lived in a diverse area and were exposed to a lot of different cultures. I think that's really important. It's very easy for us to live in the suburbs and, go months without seeing an ethnic person and not think much of it. But it is important to, get out of your little bubble and expose your kids to other cultures, other types of people, black, white, whatever. There's a big world out there besides ourselves. And I think the more we expose them to that and we have conversations and they feel comfortable to ask us questions, the healthier they will feel about their identity.
I love that. That's perfect. That's so great. And with that, I do want to wrap this up with some quick tips that you ladies may have. And you've already provided us with so much already, right? And I know folks that will follow this discussion will gain so much from what you've shared. From your personal experiences, but could each of you take a minute and just share one sentence, one thing, or share one thing that you would like everyone to know about growing up biracial or raising biracial children? What do you feel is important to share with folks out there? So I'm going to go with what I see on my screen here, left to right. Sylvia, you're first if you're ready.
I will say that I would want everyone to recognize that they are all biracial. Going back to Miranda's comment of we're human, that if you took a DNA test, I'm sure we could all trace back to Mesopotamia somehow, right? We're all one human family, and that it's important that putting people in boxes, I think, is nice because you can find common ground when you associate with certain activities, identities, certain things. And I think there's something nice about that, right? When you celebrate Congolese culture, right? Or German culture, right? Our own. There's beauty in that because the differences do unleash all sorts of emotions, I think, of tradition and all that. But at the same time, like respecting those differences and celebrating them is just so important. Whoa, sorry, Evelyn, that was more than one sentence.
That's okay. That's all right. No, it's perfect.
Having grace is important.
Having grace. Yes. Miranda.
I'm going to try for one sentence and just say who you are is who you are on the inside.
That's awesome. I love it. Thank you. Amanda?
One piece of advice I would like to say with raising biracial children is to prepare them and let them know that racism is live and well. Because I feel like to just be shocked by it instead of kind of getting a head up on it can be more a little detrimental. So, you know, prepare your biracial children because you don't know what they are going to have to face being biracial.
That's an excellent point. Excellent. Thank you so much, ladies. This was incredible. I truly appreciate you being vulnerable and open and willing to share your stories. So thank you so very much.